After the gigantic success of Steven Spielberg's Jaws in 1975, famous film producer Dino De Laurentiis would commission a new movie made to capitalize on that film's popularity. What resulted was a knockoff of sorts called Orca, a movie about a vengeful killer whale going up against a person in an all-out personal battle. Now, while Jaws ripoffs and lampoons at the time were all kind of lesser in quality in nature, like Piranha or Grizzly, Orca is the rare time where I have to admit that I think the resulting film is actually not only good, but something that I think movie fans should most definitely see. Which is one of the reasons why upon rewatch I was surprised to find out that this film has a ridiculously low Rotten Tomatoes score of only 9%. For comparison's sake, Jaws 2 has close to 60, and Batman and Robin even scores higher than Orca. Needless to say, if you haven't seen this movie, I'm going to go ahead and state that I think this film is absolutely underrated and one of the better animal attack films from that decade. And it's something that has unfortunately been overly criticized and brushed away for some pretty obvious similarities to the original Jaws, but even if it was designed to be nothing more than a knockoff, I am of the opinion that it's absolutely better than every single Jaws sequel that came after it, and here is exactly why. At the beginning of the film, we get a bunch of special effects integration that was pretty well done for the time, involving a pair of killer whales that have mated for life. The animals begin to jump out of the water and playfully swim around in what is a stark difference to the suspenseful opening of Jaws. Orca tells the story of a man played by Richard Harris attempting to avoid a killer whale. The plot starts out with his character attempting to catch a great white shark that immediately gets killed by an orca after the fish tries to attack a local diver. Harris' character, Nolan, then seeks to bag a killer whale to sell to an exhibit and secure the funds necessary for him to return home. Unfortunately, while doing so, he accidentally nicks the fin of a male whale while simultaneously stabbing its mate. The animal writhes around in pain and tries to kill itself in the boat's propeller before they're about to reel it up and go home. But while they're doing so, the female orca miscarries, and its offspring's fetus drops out onto the deck in what is a hauntingly dark scene. Nolan, freaked out from the event, hoses the corpse off of the boat before the male orca that he nicked becomes enraged at the death of his infant and capturing of his mate. Eventually, Nolan and his crew release the female killer whale into the water during the night, and the male soon finds it and begins to try everything he can to get it to swim again, despite the animal obviously being beyond saving. There's this really sad moment in the film where the pod of whales that they both belong to at first follows the male while it's nudging its mate along, but after they find out that it's pretty much over and done with, the other whales leave him and turn the opposite direction while he continues to push her out to sea and eventually onto a beach. The rest of the movie involves Nolan being haunted by the whale anytime he tries to look out into the open waters that surround the town he's taken up as a temporary home in. Now, what makes Orca even more interesting has to be the relation of the killer whale to Richard Harris' character in particular, with a pretty sad revelation that what happened to the whale also happened to the man before in the past. A drunk driver killed his wife and unborn child after irresponsibly getting behind the wheel when he was wasted. And in the words of Nolan himself, he's this whale's drunk driver, and his avoidance of the responsibility to face this creature ends up harming the entire town and friend group that he's garnered at this point in his life. The whale starts to attack boats that are in the harbor. It starts to attack his friends that are trying to stay alive and get home while taking up refuge in the town. It's pretty dark. At an early point in the movie, he even goes to a reverend asking whether or not it's possible to sin against an animal, and finding out that yes, you can even sin against a blade of grass, but it's really ourselves who we sin against. Needless to say, this is one of the most depressing and kind of dark animal attack movies I think I've ever seen, and if you want to know how it all plays out, well, it's not exactly good for Harris in the end. Even if he does take responsibility for his actions and goes out to face the whale in the film's climax. I think the movie's main message seems to be one about responsibility, but it is rather cruel in some ways that I don't fully think people understood or really enjoyed when it came out. Personally, I'm not even sure if I completely understand it, but I will say that as far as a bitter rivalry and comparison thing goes, the killer whale and Nolan are contrasted here extremely well, and the way both of their stories collide at the end and what eventually happens in the third act, it's pretty interesting, and it's very dark, and it's something that I think people should see if they're into the original Jaws. Richard Harris alone gives an incredible performance here, which may have had something to do with the trauma he was facing in his own life at the time, which apparently had to do with the fact that while reading a tabloid magazine during filming, he found out that his wife was pictured with a younger man on a beach. This led to the actor's heavy drinking on set as a coping mechanism for what was going on, and he reportedly intended to quit filming so he could go to Malibu in order to kill them both. He only stopped after getting into a brawl that resulted in the writer Luciano Visconti getting a black eye. Harris agreed to do all of his stunts during some of the more action-oriented scenes in the movie and apparently nearly died on several occasions from what some people allege went on during filming. Whatever really happened, you can see a really good performance from Harris in this film, and the special effects for the Orca sell its story extremely well, alongside the excellent music made by Ennio Morricone, who you'll probably know from the soundtrack of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Sadly, all people really had to say about Orca when it came out was that it was just some sort of ripoff of Jaws, which is certainly true in a green lighting sense, but the movie has a lot of other elements to it that make it stand out from what came before. I always knew it to be the ripoff of Jaws that was really good, and while I don't think the movie is exactly flawless, particularly due to the animal somehow knowing that gasoline is flammable and using that to its advantage at one point in the plot, I do think that Orca is a film that people should discuss and talk about as soon as they can, because out of all of the animal attack films that have come out over the years, this is one of the most personal and human that I think was ever made. But hey, those are all just my own thoughts on Orca. What do all of you think about the movie? Do you think it's underrated like I do, and have you ever even seen it? Personally, I think it's far better than it's made out to be, but hey, whatever your own thoughts happen to be, I'd love to hear them in the comments down below.